All right, so it's 6:02, so I think just let's respect everybody's time. We are going to start our discussion tonight. My name is Maria Rodriguez. I work for the New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. And I want to, welcome everyone for joining this discussion about financial aid option for students with foster care experience who are planning their college journey or other post-secondary pathway after high school. I would like to start by telling you a little bit of who we are. So the New York State Higher Education Services Corporation is the agency that administer all the financial aid program for college student in New York. We administer over 30 programs, including the tuition assistance program or TAP, as we all know it, and basically to help students have access and pay for any post-secondary journey that they are exploring. Tonight discussion is going to be focused on helping students understand the financial aid resources available to support their education, including federal, state programs, scholarships, and campus support services. And as we all know, navigating the financial aid system can feel at time overwhelming, but we just want to make sure that you understand that you are not alone. There are so many programs, so many institutions that are ready to support you, through this journey. And we just want to make sure that you have those resources. So our goal today is to provide you with clear information, practical steps, and encouragement to explore the different opportunity available to help you pay for college. So with that, I'm so excited because we have amazing panelists with extensive experience about financial aid opportunity, student support services, and also advocacy for foster care youth. So with that, again, I want to thank you all for joining. And to get started, I would like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background and the work they do to support students.
Well, hello. My name is Kelly Pennebaker. I'm with the Office of Children and Family Services and the Division of Youth and Development Success for Youth. And my bureau is the Bureau of Education and Transitional Support Services. And my bureau supports youth in foster care and who are aging out of foster care from 18 to 21 and beyond. And we oversee the education and training voucher, and we do the foster care verification for the Foster Youth College Success Initiative.
Hi, my name is Tiana Ellis. I'm a current senior undergraduate at the University of Albany, and I'm also the current FISE intern at SUNY Administration. I also work as it would be a campus liaison / peer advisor for the foster youth program on my campus, U Albany, Go Great Danes, for Dr. Leandra Harris.
Awesome. I love it. So good evening, everyone. I'm Clarissa Hartzog, and I am the SUNY counterpart to the Foster Youth College Success Initiative coordinator. And so pretty much with my role, working with Tiana and one of our other colleagues, we really try to support FISE students across the SUNY system, just trying to ensure that with the program, they're able to navigate college and life and be able to have that financial support that is so pivotal. So good to meet you all.
Good evening, everyone. Tony Rivera. First, I'm a foster youth alum, a former EOP and HEOP student. And through my organization, Foster Reminds, I help students who are transitioning out of the foster care system navigate the college process, but also provide life skills as opposed to some of the social emotional skills that help them once they arrive on the college campus, and what they can expect once they arrive on campus.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. As you can see, you guys are here for a treat with a lot of information. So please don't be shy. If as we are getting into the discussion, feel free to drop question on in the Q&A session. We will get to them at the end. But again, thank you for being here, and let's get started. So I will be asking some question, and I'm gonna start the question with Clarissa. So, Clarissa, what are the most important federal financial aid program that foster care youth should be aware of? How do being an independent student on the FAFSA impact their eligibility for this program? And if you can also just give us some step on what they should be focusing on when applying to financial aid.
Yeah, definitely. So some of the programs that come top of mind is going to be obviously FAFSA, naturally TAP, but then also opportunity programs, which I know Tony can speak to. And these programs is really a powerhouse of support for students. Obviously, with doing FAFSA, doing the TAP, that helps us, to support students financially. But even opportunity programs are sometimes um, unknown, and so it's really important if you're applying for college to see if the campus that you're looking at, whether if it's private, whether if it's CUNY, whether if it's SUNY, that you look into those, because really the opportunity programs, you have a really holistic support that you're given for opportunity programs. So you're able to get financial support, but then you also kind of have your village, so to speak, who can support you throughout your 4 years and even beyond. And with some of the other things that you mentioned, Maria, I would say the independent status that foster youth students has, a lot of times it works to your benefit when you're applying for those programs or even just FAFSA in general, where it's, students who might come from a traditional background, they have to put, family members' income and their set situation, where if you're an independent student, it's just you representing your specific household, your specific situation, your income. And so that sometimes can open up, the opportunity or the doorway for you to be able to qualify for certain grant funding. I always say free money is the best money. And so different grant opportunities that you can utilize to be able to support you during your college career. And I think one of the other questions you said, Maria, was um, as far as with applying, I think it's really important to get support. And then this kind of goes into maybe the second question you might be touching upon, but making sure you have support in whatever shape or form, from someone who can kind of hold you accountable, because it's a lot, right? We all, like financial aid or just the college process can sometimes feel daunting if you've never done it before, if you feel like you don't have, all the supports that maybe others might have. But if you have kind of that trusted persons or a person in your corner, you can at least be able to, move mountains that you feel are there. And then we're always here too as a resource.
Definitely. And Tiana, I think I would love to get your input into this question. What would you think are some key steps student with foster care experience should take when applying for financial aid?
Um, as a former youth and care myself, my first thing was learning how to ask for help. I know it's very hard when it comes to asking caseworkers because you feel as if you're a burden or they're not going to understand the situation because of their caseload. But it's sad to say, but this is their job and it's their job to help. That's why they are there. Um, and another thing that I really like, as soon as Clarissa mentioned it, it came up when she said free money is the best money. When it comes to loans, I had a caseworker who was not as educated on the FAFSA side of things. And so it got very complicated when it came to applying to colleges. So I had to do my own research. Loans, grants, any kind of resources that are out there for financial aid, you most likely have to research on your own, but I promise you there are resources out there for you and they're there for you so for you to utilize them. So don't be scared of applying. or scared of asking your caseworker or anybody on your team for help when you find out these programs.
And that's so important that you mentioned that, because I think that's one of those key components where sometimes you don't find out those resources because you're scared to ask or you are not asking those questions. But moving forward, Kelly, the next question is for you. What type of scholarship are specifically available for students with foster care experience, and how can students find and apply to those scholarships?
Well, one that I really wanted to tell you about that was new, I think started last year. It's the Honorable Judith K. Scholarship. It's through the New York State Bar Association. And this is for individuals in foster care with the goal of APLA, which is another planned permanency living arrangement. So either you're currently in care with that goal, or you have aged out of foster care or discharged from foster care with that goal, and that would make you eligible for this scholarship. And we just started working with the New York State Bar Association last year on this. And this year, I believe, I don't have the dollar amounts, but I know that it was awarded to 7 students. And I don't really have the dollar amounts. I'm dropping it in the chat so that you have that resource. And I know as far as other scholarships, what comes to mind is like the Excelsior Scholarship, which I think maybe Clarissa would have a little more information on that one. I just wanted to make sure that I get into tell you about this new one with the New York State Bar Association.
Wonderful. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I'll add something really quick. The other part, also with scholarships, is sometimes talking with the specific institution that you're applying to. A lot of times, if you speak with the financial aid advisor or representative, they can let you know for institution-specific scholarships that they are offering. And I think sometimes different opportunities get left on the table because you're not aware of it, and they're not sure that you qualify or that you have an interest of it. And I think the other part I was just going to mention is making sure that when you're applying for financial aid, that whatever is your situation, and though we know your story is not necessarily who you are, and in that you don't want maybe the things that you've gone through and how maybe your foster care background or experience has affected you, that is something that people not necessarily might not want to carry with them. But a lot of times with doing your FAFSA, doing your TAP, they will ask a question to say, were you in the past a, foster youth, ward of court, or orphan? And some students, again, don't want that to be, yes, that was my story, but I'm moving forward. But when you actually select yes to that, that allows you to qualify, or for them to say, hey, oh, okay, let me tell you about FISE. And here's the form that you need to fill out so that you can have this, grant or scholarship based funding. And so just saying that to say, like, don't allow maybe that for some people, that feeling of like, I don't want this to just be something that is carried with me, to be a deterrent for you knowing about different scholarships and different opportunities.
Yes, it's so important. I think doing that research and making sure that there's so many organization and foundation out there as well from the private sector that provides support is also key. But moving on to the next question, and I'm gonna ask this question to Tony and Tiana. What type of support services are available on college campuses for foster care youth?
I'll start by just saying I want to piggyback. If you get into an opportunity program, or if you're out of high school and your school counselor doesn't know anything about the opportunity program, I encourage you to apply, specifically if you think you may qualify. If you are foster care and your GPA fall within the range, there's 64 different campuses or opportunity programs. If you're in the city, there's Seek and Discovery if you're in the CUNY system. But I encourage you to apply as a freshman because you have to be an incoming freshman to get in, right? That's the requirement. Because if you get in to a college and you don't get into the opportunity program and you get matriculated, you can't go backwards and get into an opportunity program. And I think that is key because you have to be an incoming freshman. Um, the support network is huge for if you're in an opportunity program. The research is there for the opportunity programs. These programs have better graduation rate in some cases than some of the institutions because of their wraparound services, like Clarissa mentioned, the trauma informed staffing that they sort of provide to their students. And these are folks that are they understand where you're coming from when you arrive on their campus. Um, Going back to some of the resources when you're on campus, you definitely want to become best friends with the financial aid office. Um, with the counseling center, right? Because you know that every individual is different. But I know for me personally, from my personal experience, when I arrived on the college campus, I came through an opportunity program, but I also knew some of the things that would trigger for me. So I made it a point to build that relationship with the counseling center, just so I can have, an outlet to sort of just share, my experience. And if I needed a person to talk through. I was fortunate enough. I was a basketball player, so I actually have my coaches. But definitely, reach out to your RAs if you're on campus. These are folks that, and you don't necessarily have to share your story, but just know that you have people on campus that are there to support you, that can point you in the right direction. And like Carlissa said, um, don't don't let your story from being in care stop you from completing these forms in the process. I will tell you from the research, that's the case from around the country. The self-identifying themselves of letting them know that you were in care. That's happening around the country, and then students are ending up on campuses in their 2 year in, and the programs that they're part of don't know they're foster youth, and they're missing out on 2 year worth of financial assistance that they could have been eligible for.
Thank you. Tiana, anything that you would like to add to this question?
I feel that was like a very positive response. And coming from a U Albany student that's actually on the campus, I don't have as broad of an education as Dr. Tony does of how the system works. Personally, for me, there isn't a lot of resources for foster youth on my campus. Um, Coming into college, I basically wanted a space where I would feel a lot more comfortable as myself. And I thought that would be best in an LOC, which is a live and learning community, which had to do with my major. But then I realized like none of the people that I surrounded myself with, I had anything in common. And I want to go back to what both Clarissa and Dr. Tony said about your story. You don't have to share your story, but what I've learned from my experience is that my story is my biggest tool. It's what has allowed a lot of doors that would have never opened for me before to be opened and allowed me to open a lot more doors for people like me. Um, I didn't have, there are general organizations and services on campuses like mental health resources. I also didn't qualify for EOP because my GPA, so I wasn't able to go in there. So when I came onto the campus looking for a community and I didn't find one, I decided to build one myself. And so a lot of youth who go into college, they feel discouraged that when there isn't an already established community for them, that there is no place for them, but you can also just do it yourself. Like you're grown enough to where you have the freedom to create those communal spaces for people like you. So if you as a youth feel as if your voice is not being heard, gather those youth who also feel the same way and create that community because that's when changes actually start to be made. Now on campus, we have programs like Self-Reliant Scholars where a lot of foster youth come together to give not only advice, but programs and events that we throw for just foster youth. We don't have advisors and we don't have direct support systems. So we've become that for each other.
Great. That's such an amazing input because I think it's true. Like you're creating a community that is going to give you that support. And I think, as we all come from different agency and background, and I think, finding that support that is going to alleviate some of the confusion or some of the challenges that you might be facing is really important. And to follow up with the next question, Clarissa and Tony, and I think maybe this was probably discussed, but how can student access these resources, and who should they contact for the help?
I would say if you're currently in high school right now, your school counselor, so I'm a school counselor. I was a high school counselor for many years. I'm in elementary now. Your school counselor should be, if you're not close with them, they should be your contact like right now, because they have to write you a letter of recommendation, right? Whether you're a foster youth or not, most school counselors will write a letter of recommendation, and they're going to be the first one to, I don't want to say out your story, but they'll be able to share your story and what you've been through in a way that is going to, um if you're trans, and I'll talk from my personal experience. My high school GPA coming out of high school was a 74, right? In the schools that I now apply for HOP and EOP, my counselor was able to write a letter of recommendation that showcases my potential and not what the transcript detailed. Um, so that's going to be your first advocate. I would say research, just like Tiana said, you want to be your your best advocate. It's easier now with the amount of tools that we have to access some of those. If computer access is one of those barriers for you, you can go to the public library and get access to the computer so you can be able to do your research. Talk to some of the other students. In your school. Talk to, if it's a school that you really have your heart set on, call up the admissions office, take a tour, go visit. Because you really want to, when you look at the college process, you want to find that fit and you want to sort of find that home. You may like big schools. I didn't want to go to a big school, so I went to a small private school, right? And I wanted to sort of, like Tiana said, I wanted to build that community. Some of my best friends to this day are my college basketball teammates. And I still keep in touch with my college basketball coach. But my circle is small, but I set out to sort of to build that community just like Tiana did. But you definitely have to, this is no time to be bashful. You have to advocate for yourself or have someone that can advocate on your behalf, but you have to take action.
Wonderful. Anything that you would like to add, Clarissa, to this question?
Just really quickly, kind of what Tony already echoed, and then um like caseworkers, possibly financial aid reps, like we've mentioned. But then one of the places I feel like is a hub that students, when you are maybe just starting out, or even if you are looking and going on different campus visits, whether it's on your own or going on college tours, the student affairs or the campus centers, that is like the hub where if you need help and you don't know who necessarily to ask, you can always go there and they will direct you to the tutoring services. They'll direct you to the counselors who can kind of help you in different avenues. So I would say, again, if you're looking ahead of time, reach out trying to make those connections. And then also with me thinking about my undergrad experience, sometimes speaking with like the student ambassadors who are working in admissions, like pulling them to the side, maybe after the tour and like, here's a burning question that I have. Like, give me your honest answer, like give me the tea, as the young folks say. But really sometimes asking those who have been in your shoes, and you can ask that, what do you know now that you wish you would have known when you're first starting out? If you can ask the Tianas of the campus, then you can be able to like kind of have that leg up that maybe other students might not.
Wonderful. Does anybody else would like to add anything to this question, or should we move forward?
I'd like to say, if you're reaching out to your caseworker and your caseworker is unsure or unaware, they can also reach out to the independent living coordinator. When you're in foster care, you're supposed to be receiving independent living services. And each each agency, each county has an independent living coordinator. And our bureau is in constant communication with them, sharing updated information as we get it, sending out reminders for the education training voucher, for FISE, for this new scholarship from the New York State Bar Association. We share all that information on a regular basis, and we'll send out reminders when the deadlines are coming up so that they're sharing the information. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a lot of turnover with caseworkers and information gets missed, or maybe somebody's just not aware yet. But you could ask to speak with the independent living coordinator, and they should have all of this information as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And the next question, Tony, what are some common barrier that foster care youth face when applying for financial aid, and how do you think they can overcome them?
Some of the foster youth that I work with, sometimes they don't have access to their the birth certificate, the social security. That's one of the biggest barriers because they have to rely on some of the caseworkers to get that information in a timely fashion. Um, and like Tiana says, some caseworkers, they are not knowledge when it comes to the college process, right? They have a caseload that they have to manage. So getting skilled and the research and doing the research yourself is going to be crucial. Um, the birth certificate is one of them. If you don't have a good high school experience, because I know, I talk about school counselors, right? But I understand I'm not naive. There's some, kiddos that don't have a good experience with their school counselors and they coming out of a school and they may not you feel like they have an advocate with but there's other people in the school they may have connected with. Many of the teachers that work in these schools, they had to go to school, right? The teachers, they had to go to school and get a master's, right? You might have a teacher that you might be an English teacher that you bonded with, feel free, even though that's your English teacher, you might say, hey, how, what made you become a teacher? Tell me which schools you went to, right? So to build that relationship, you can ask those questions that's not related to their the subject areas. I know for me it was my school counselor and my English teacher helped me do the college process. My English teacher looked over my essay, made sure it was you know written well enough. And I struggled with my writing, so I wasn't afraid to ask for help, and I wasn't afraid to take that initiative because I knew, and Tiana probably can relate to this. Like I knew I wanted to get out of my circumstances, and I knew that education was going to be my way out. And I know that some force youth don't. The education may not be at the forefront, but I just knew even back then, statistically, if I would had an education beyond high school, where my life would be. And I just, I fell in love with education that sort of kept me in the different positions on the college campus and everywhere I went. But don't be afraid to ask for help. And sometimes the barrier could be yourself. You can have that fear that your story, you let it, right, that I want to use a trauma because that's really what it is a trauma that you're afraid of doing or stepping out the comfort zone, or you have the mindset that says I can't do these things because of who I am. And that's where in the work that I do with my organization, I try to switch that mindset and change the mindset of the foster youth, thinking like Tiana said, your story is your superpower. Yep.
Wonderful. I like that. Does
Yes.
anybody else want to add anything to this question?
I wanted to jump in a little bit. Tony mentioned a great point when he said that you may not have the best relationship with your teachers, but you have to find someone. I feel like a lot of young people, our generation, get caught up in the fact that asking anyone older for you is hard because you don't know how to anymore, especially when you've gone through something where the adults and the people that you looked up to have, like, you know, basically ruined your image and disappointed you. And so from what I've learned, sad to say, and I don't mean to get too personal, but I was homeless throughout high school. So I was that kid who volunteered for everything and stayed behind. So I got to know my teachers and my counselors very well. But I tend to become my largest enemy in the fact that once I start to see that success is easy for me to gain, I no longer want to do it because I don't believe that's for me. And so if you start to like realize that like, hey, I'm becoming my biggest like obstacle right now, I have the opportunity to like go towards it. Give up on that negative energy in yourself where you're just like, I don't deserve it, and just continue working towards it because you wouldn't have it if you didn't deserve it. You get me? That's
Yes,
my thing.
definitely. And foster care youth are going through so many changes throughout their life that I think trusting and building those relationships can be one of those hard things for them to do. And I think the more that they are aware that there is support available and that not only with the high school, the counselor, but also outside agencies such as our agency does a lot of workshop and FAFSA completion events where we assist in completing the FAFSA tab with the student. So please feel free to really explore all those support systems that are out of the foster care system or your immediate community. Um, Diana, and that was amazing. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that question. But if not, Diana, I want to follow up with a question for you. For students currently in foster care, what advice do you have about starting the financial aid process?
Um, so when I started, I had no idea. I come from an immigrant background, so I had no idea that we had to fill out FAFSA. And when I asked my caseworker, she also had no idea. She didn't know like what income to put, how we should go about it. And the more questions that I asked, I think she just, got kind of overwhelmed. But one of the largest things that I learned was a staff directory on a college website and like search up like the financial aid office. And I would like email like the heads of like every department. And I would be like, hey, I'm trying to apply to this college, but I really needed help with da 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 da. How do I go about it? Um, and for FAFSA, I was fortunate enough, I did join Fair Futures, I think like 2 months before I started college, and I ended up getting a career coach as well as like a tutor and a bunch of other resources. But once I met with them and they like realized the situation, they were like, yeah, no, we have to redo this. Let's make a meeting with state ed and with FAFSA so that you can like let them understand like, hey, she filled this out wrong. So like really like Google was my best friend during that time. And so I really just tried every single program that was like dedicated to foster youth, dedicated to students trying to go to college that came into my email from like the New York State Education Department. I applied.
Wonderful. You are so amazing, Tiana. So I'm so glad that you're here to give the student perspective. And as we move to the next question, for Kelly and Clarissa, and anyone that needs to add anything to it, and I think Tiana, we would love to hear your personal experience. But how can student make the most of campus resources and support network? And how can they find out if their college offer a specific program for foster care youth?
So I would say when starting, or even before starting onto the campus, asking and doing some calls and checking out like what the calendar of events are, so that when you come on the campus, when they have orientation, which is usually, I mean, every campus varies, but is usually, and maybe Tiana can, share her own experience, is either one or multiple days where students kind of get the crash course of like, this is campus life. Here are the resources. Here are the clubs on campus, so they will, and then also the academics aspects of it as well. but I would say attend orientation, also participate in some of those kind of kickoff events, because a lot of times when I've been on the grounds on campuses, that we would have tabling events where we'd have every office represented, all hands on deck, where you would have the counseling center, you would have tutoring services, you would have, other student affair based or even support groups, right? And so a lot of times this is where, because it's new and it's different environment and it feels maybe out of the norm, pushing past maybe some of that nervousness and going and making those connections, going to the table and just asking or grabbing a card, right? And so sometimes it can be, uncomfortable navigating that, especially if it's your first, exposure or experience to campus and staff and clubs and Greek life and things of that nature. But it's important to push yourself beyond your comfort zone, because then that can really set the trajectory of your time on campus, because you've made those connections. And then the last thing I'll say really quick is, even again, campus tours, where you go on the campus tours, or if you make, like Tiana said, she called and she sent different emails, you can kind of get the lay of the land well before others have. And this is also a testament to the opportunity programs, right? A lot of times people think, like, well, with opportunity programs, you do have to academically and economically qualify, but with all the different programs, there's a campus that is there for you. You could be a student who maybe struggled, and then maybe your last few years you did well, or you could be a student who did well all 4 of your years, and you could find a campus where you could have, the high 90s and still be able to get into a HEOP or an EOP. So I think sometimes, we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes it's making those connections and saying, I want to get into this program. How do I go about it? Is there somewhere that's the right fit for me? And a lot of times it is, but it might not be maybe your first choice. It might not be like the place that you initially thought or you envisioned, but then later you go through the process and like, this is right where I need to be. But
Kelly, anything that you would like to add to this question?
No, I was thinking the same thing as Clarissa. Sometimes it's about kind of pushing yourself past your comfort zone. Um, if you you tend to have a hard time asking for help, but it doesn't always have to be help. It could just be gathering information, asking questions, and 9 times out of 10, you're coming across somebody that is more than willing to have your ear for a little bit, to tell you all about, their department, and to help direct you where you need to go. I know sometimes it can be difficult, like if you're cold calling a college, um, getting the right person or finding the right department. So attending those events are really important, because all of the departments are right there for you to easily have access to ask questions, to gather information. And maybe you'll need that department or maybe you won't, but maybe in the future you might need that department. So it's just good to gather all of that and have that, in your back pocket for when you do need it.
Thank you. And Tiana, please, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your personal experience.
Um, First, I want to say I feel like as a foster youth, a lot of us forget that we have a choice in a lot of the things that we do and choose in life, especially when it comes to education. I know for me, I didn't think that I could even get into, much less afford to apply for a lot of the colleges that I had a dream of. And so I don't want to say I settled, because as I said, it's a great day to be a great Dane, but I do feel as if with a lot of the circumstances that come from being in foster care and not feeling like you have direct support with everything that you want to ask, it sometimes becomes that feeling like, oh, well, I don't have a choice but to attend the institution that's easier for the people around me to understand and to get in contact with. And that limits not only who you are as a person, because you're just limiting yourself to what you think you deserve, but it also limits what you can do, because most of the time the colleges that we choose, I know for me, I didn't do a lot of research to Albany. I just knew a lot of people from my area that was going there, and I didn't think that I would get into my dream school or afford it. So I was just like, I might as well apply. I ended up getting in. As Clarissa said, orientation is very, very important. I went alone. It was like the earliest morning ever. And I think when I sat in that room with everybody else, I felt like, oh, okay, well, I wouldn't get along with any of these people because they wouldn't know where I'm from. We're from two different places. But the more that I actually got to like hang around the group, the more that I realized that all of us felt alone and all of us felt like losers and all of us felt like we had no idea what was going on. And so it was a lot easier for me to connect with people on campus after I realized that I can be who I am because everybody else is being who they are. And so it sounds kind of corny, but it's like your foster care background, it's a background for a reason. It doesn't describe who you are. It just describes a part of your story. And a lot of people forget that because you get lost in what that means and the circumstances that you've gone before. But college is what you make it. And I really had to instill that in my head that the experiences that other people have had before you or the experience that you think you're going to get is not what you're going to get. Because I never thought I would say it's a great day to be a great day. But hey, saying it in public, it's shameful.
It's amazing, right? It's something that I think as young adult, the communication sometimes it doesn't come easier for young adult that are exploring the college pathway or jobs. There's always those uncertainty and sometimes held back the potential that we have. So I'm glad that you were able to share that with us so that we can really provide this information to our audience that, even though that sometimes you are scared about doing something, do it anyway. Because it's important for us to put ourselves in, like Larissa was mentioning, in places where we're not comfortable. So as we continue the discussion, I think now we're going to move on to talk about a specific foster care programs available. And the next set of questions are going to be directed to Kelly, but please feel free to join if anyone in the audience in the panel has anything to add to those questions. But Kelly, what is the education and training voucher ETV program, and who is eligible to apply?
So the education and training voucher is federal money that each state in the United States receives this federal money. And this is for individuals who were in foster care on or after their 14th birthday. It could have been one day after your 14th birthday, and you would qualify for the education and training voucher.
How can student apply? And what type of expenses does it cover?
I am going to put that in the chat for you. This is the link to apply. So the portal opens August 1st for the next school year. So for the 26-27 academic school year, you'll be able to apply starting on August 1st. And this will cover tuition, room and board, and needs. So when you're completing the application in the portal, you want to be honest about the things that you might need. If you're needing assistance with books, with transportation, with food, just being honest on that application will open up the door to more money through the education and training voucher.
Wonderful. And are there any age limit when applying?
So one of the things you want to do is make sure that you apply before age 21. And you can receive the education training voucher for 5 years, so up until your 26th birthday. But one of the things you really want to make sure that you do is that you're applying before 21, because after 21 you would not be eligible for applying for the first time.
Okay. And what would you say are some common challenges students face when applying for the ETV, and how can they avoid them?
So there is, they do monitor successful academic progress and expect you to have a GPA of 2.0 or higher. There is a little wiggle room there. Life happens, emergencies arise, and sometimes, the GPA falls below that 2.0. And at that point, the student would be put on academic probation. Doesn't mean that that money is being pulled just yet. And our vendor would work with you to get back on track so that you can continue receiving that funding.
Does anyone would like to add anything to those questions, or can we move forward? I think we're good to move forward. So now my next set of question is for Foster Youth College to Say initiative. And I would like to ask Clarissa some of the first question. And the first one is, can you explain what Foster Youth College to Say initiative is and how it supports students in higher education?
Yeah, so we affectionately call it FISE for short. So I'll use the acronym. So it's the program you're referring to. And so with FISE, what it does is it seeks a way how to support foster youth, orphan, and ward of court students throughout their time while completing their first time associate's degree and bachelor's degree. And what it does is it provides a grant funding in order to support students, whether if it's their tuition, fees, books, personal expenses, medical expenses. And I actually put within the chat, you all will see there is a one pager that you all can click on and save, and it actually has some links on there. But really looking at like with any gaps that a student might possibly have, kind of being that umbrella, so to speak, to support students. If there are times where they, need that additional, support. And then the other benefit with FISE is that a lot of times some students sometimes face during the intercession different housing or food insecurity. And so we try to, again, use the funding outside of a student standard award. So for this year, as an example, though each year it can change, we have offered students for the year $7,500. But outside of that, we also give funding so students can, whether they're staying on campus or if they're living off campus, providing support to students so they don't have to couch surf or wonder where their next meal is going to happen during the winter or the summer months. And so that's another benefit or resource to FISE, just really looking at, okay, how can we remove the different barriers or stumbling blocks that students sometimes fall into while in college because they don't have the support networks that maybe some other students have. We can at least offer the funding so that they can be able to have that stability, that financial stability in those areas, whether if it's academically or personally.
Wonderful. And the next question is, how can student apply for FISE and what are the eligibility criteria?
So FISE, I can say, is fairly painless. It's a one pager, if not actually really a half a page that a student would complete. And it's pretty much just self-identifying and saying, I'm Clarissa. And one of the things I'll say, just to backtrack with FISE, it's slightly different than ETV. You have to be in order to be FISE eligible, on or after your 13th birthday, have to have that foster care background, right? So even similar to like Kelly mentioned, if it was just one day after 13 you were in foster care, then you qualify. So I wanted to mention that. And you said something, sorry, I know I wanted to backtrack, make sure I didn't miss that point. What did you just say,
So
Maria?
that how can student apply?
Yeah,
And
so
what are the eligibility criteria?
Yeah, so the consent form. So it's a simple consent form that a student fills out, just listing the institution that you're applying to, your name, information, the last four of your social, and your date of birth. And so that allows OCFS, Kelly and her lovely team to be able to look to see that yes, I can see within the New York State system that, Clarissa was a foster youth and it's, one and done. And then at least with FISE, once you've applied one time, you don't have to keep applying each year. The only time where students sometimes will have to sometimes do a new consent form is if you transfer, say, from a Hudson Valley Community College and then go over to UAlbany, then we need to know where you are in order to, support or fund that student. And so that's sometimes where you'll have to change, that you'll have to send an updated consent form.
Are there
So-
any age limit when applying? Oh, I'm sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just something I wanted to add to that
Mhm.
is that it's very important to include the college that you will be attending on that consent form because the funding is provided through the college. So we would need that in order to be able to process the form. And it's also one of the requirements of FISE. So aside from the foster care requirement, you need to be a New York State resident and attending either a SUNY, a CUNY, or a private New York State private school with an HEOP.
Mhm.
So it's very important to make sure that the consent form is complete. It's like Clarissa said, it's not very long. It's just a couple of questions. But we do need your name and your the last four of your social security number and your date of birth, which enables us to look for you in our system. That information, your foster care history is not shared with anyone. That consent form just allows the Office of Children and Family Services to share with the state education department that yes, you meet the eligibility requirements for foster care, or if you don't.
Mhm.
But the
One thing
difference
I was
with,
going to add to, sorry,
no, it's okay, go ahead.
is so the one point too I wanted to emphasize is that, like Kelly was mentioning, they're looking within the New York State system. So if you have if you are a foster youth student or you're supporting a foster youth student who might have been a foster youth outside of New York State, you still do that consent form, but the only added piece that you might have to add to it is just some type of documentation is confirmed, like Clarissa was a foster youth in Texas. And so, and then you complete the consent form, and then it's okay, great, because there's no way for them to look within, because the consent form only allows OCFS to verify their records in their system. So that's why that has to accompany it. And so I just wanted to just throw that out there.
And then,
Mhm.
oh, go ahead. I think we're on
No,
the
the
same
age
track.
limit. Sorry, the last thing I was gonna say is the age limit. We do have a minimum, but there's no age cap. You can be an adult learner who has dependents, and so you have to be on or after your 13th birthday, be a New York State resident, and attending a New York State, institution. But you could be, like I said, an adult learner, but there's no cap. There's no cap or academic restrictions with FISE. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And we have some students who are in their 60s that have applied for FISE. The other status that I wanted to mention as well is orphan. So if a student had lost their parents between the ages of 13 and 18 years old, that also qualifies to receive the Foster Youth College Success Initiative.
Wonderful, thank you. Can student apply for both programs, the ETV and FISES?
100%.
Mhm.
100%. And even if you're unsure and you don't know, apply. The worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to tell you you don't qualify. But if it's there, apply for it. So the difference with FISE and ETV is that for ETV, you have to have been in foster care at 14 or older, and FISE is being in foster care at 13 or older. The other main difference is the colleges. So with ETV, you can be attending a college in New York State or outside of New York State. With FISE, it's very specific to SUNY, CUNY, or a New York private college with an HEOP.
Wonderful. Anything you would like to add, Clarissa? I don't know if we lost audio, but let's move to the next question, and then if Clarissa wants to add anything, then she will do so later. The next question is there no support or resources provided by FISIS on campuses? How can we change that? What will that support look like from student perspective? And this is like I'm asking it for Kelly, Clarissa, and Tiana. So I don't know, Tiana, if you would like to take this.
I can let Clarissa take it for a little bit because we have been working on trying to not just update, but also improve the FISE resources that are on college campuses. So
Okay. Yeah. No, so actually to answer your question, FISE has very much in its creation has been a financial support like program. And so that's great. But one of my biggest focal points it's changing is not just supporting students financially, but also like holistically, because it's needed. Like, yes, funds and helping to pay for things, but you also need these other additional support. So FISE in and of itself, it does not traditionally offer additional supports outside of giving you funding for the supports that you need. So if you need tutoring, okay, the funding can be used for that. Or if you need, counseling and it might be an added cost, then it can be covered. But actually having resources or a network, FISE does not have that. And so as Tiana was kind of alluding to, that's something that we're looking at, and how we can, cultivate that. And I can say that the other caveat I will make is every, campus is different. There's, for example, like Stony Brook, where one of the campus liaisons, because this is she's been at the forefront of FISE and actually in its creation and actually, putting it into existence back 10 years back. So there are like support groups, there are certain things that she has helped to lead. And so, but as far as uniformly across the system, no. But one of the things with working with some of the campus liaisons across the SUNY system to say, here are some best practices. So each year we, meet with the campus liaisons at each of the SUNY campuses to say, here are best practices to support FISE or foster youth or orphan students. And this is something that we have mentioned and presented. And so it's something that we're looking to give campus liaisons or any staff kind of toolkits to support students, because naturally they're kind of the boots on the ground. They can know and see and maybe connect with those students directly to say, okay, what do you need from us? What are the things that you're looking for? Are there things that you want to like start and take, maybe ownership and say, no, I'm a student, this is my experience, and this is what I feel that we need and what others have echoed that we need. And so I think it's more so from my or office or our vantage point to say, let's give you the toolkit, let's give you the resources so that you can, at your campus, working with your students and other colleagues to say, this is how we're going to better support our foster youth students. And Tiana, I'll let you jump in.
sorry, I forgot I was muted for a second. But piggybacking off of what Clarissa said, we really do. One, we are a very small team and we're a fairly new program. And so a lot of what we are trying to do and trying to build isn't like, I'm not gonna say it is possible, but it is not the most like probable thing right now. And so we have been trying to do our best using mainly student input and student voices to see what they would appreciate more coming from the program so that we can better assist the campuses to help those students, because we again, we're just a financial we really are just a financial program, but the finance part of it can help so much more. And if there was a lot more, I know this is one of the questions, but if there was a lot more communication between students and like either campus liaisons or maybe a FISE liaison, then I feel like a lot of the issues that come about when it comes to not just funding, but timing and programming, that it would be a lot easier to handle.
Wonderful. Kelly, anything that you would like to add?
Yes, and that email that's on the FISE consent form comes directly to my team. And they review all the emails that come through there. And sometimes students will ask questions. And as I said before, we're the Office of Children and Family Services, so we don't do the final eligibility or anything like that. We're just verifying foster care status. But we are in direct contact with the state education department and the liaisons for SUNY, CUNY, and the private colleges. So if there's a question that comes up, we make sure to get that information to them so that they can respond. And that's worked to help a lot of students with a lot of concerns or questions that they've had.
Thank you. And I think Tiana started talking about, the communication aspect of it. But the question is, how can we better ensure communication between the student and the FISE liaison?
I think one of the things that I have been trying to again offer is those toolkits, those resources, because and just to give context, so for SUNY specifically, we have at each campus there's a FISE campus liaison, and then obviously I'm the coordinator that works with each of them, and so giving them those toolkits, whether if it's email templates and resources that they can tap into, and usually what I will try to do is if there are any different opportunities, whether if there are FISE advocacy days or if there are shadow days with the legislative members and just different opportunities, I will, communicate and relay that to the campus liaison so that they can there and share it with the students. So I think one of the things I'm trying to be more intentional of is giving, again, like the toolkits, the resources, so that those who are kind of at the forefront with the students have the things that they need so that along with their other duties that they're able to best support students, and then having some of those different meetings with them so that they're able to take the time to see like the needs of the students. So I think, it's just I think from my vantage point is just giving the resources so that they can better communicate. So then if I can make or create templates and different resources, then I've done the work. It's just a matter of you just sending it off. And so I think for me, mainly just empowering those who are most directly connected with students so that it shouldn't be an issue of why they can't communicate or express information. And I think also just, being communicative as I can as much as possible, I think is another thing with FISE. Each year is different. And so I think sometimes there are different like funding questions or different delays and things that happen and students like, hey, like what's going on, what's happening? And so me trying to, be communicative as fast and as quickly as possible so that it can then trickle to the students so they're not left wondering like what's happening. And so I think that's another thing is just ensuring like timely communication and then also again stressing that point to campus liaisons like here's the information, notify your students of this, update me on what's needed so that students aren't just like blowing in the wind for lack of a better term. But Tiana, what else would you say? Or Tony or whoever?
I think you basically like engulfed it, but I would just say Clarissa is one person and she has a very large job. So, when it comes to like communications and all of that, being as I work with her, I would tell you like she makes a very immense effort. Most of the time, when it comes to timing and funding, that is just stuff that is out of the program's control. And so when she communicates with campus liaisons, the most we can hope for is that students are receiving it in a timely manner.
Tony and Kelly, anything to add?
I just want to say it confirms with some of the research, and one of my recommendations from my dissertation was to have that campus liaison, but also that liaison has to, besides the funding, like Clarissa said, it goes beyond the funding, right? That social emotional aspect specifically for foster youth, and that's when the trauma informed, someone who is trauma informed, that can really understand the sort of the journey of a foster youth, but also, you know, if you're a foster youth and you don't have that experience of having someone to sort of, help you with some of the transitions when you leave college, right? Yeah, you have the career office, but there's some students that have, before they even step into the career office, they have brothers and sisters and other family members that will sort of provide that, that knowledge of a specific field. Where foster youth, there's always that gap, where that learning curve on having to learn about some of these services. And I'm not trying to plug my organization, but this is some of the things that I do, when I'm trying to help force you understand that there's a bigger network outside of New York State, that I'm a part of. There's different advocacy groups that you can sort of explore and get sort of that training. Um, there's opportunities to share your stories and your experience, and you can get paid for it from some of these national organizations that sort of create those places where you can uplift the voices of foster youth from around the country. Um, but like Clarissa is only one person, right? So it takes, and in my research, many of the directors that I interviewed EOP and HOP directors. Many of them say some of the campuses you use partnerships from outside the campus because they can't do it alone. And going back to the college fair, the community fairs at the beginning of the year, you will see, some community partners that will come on campus, right? Some local shelters, some local, I don't want to say youth programs, but programs that can sort of fill in some of those gaps where the institution may not be able to sort of provide. And sometimes it's housing, right? There's some shelters that, some of the directors indicated that they work with local, shelters during some of the breaks, right? It's in the different areas where some of these colleges, reside. So some of the rural, some of the inner city places, right? It takes a community, but it also takes an understanding of not just getting them to college, but what can they do to sort of persist, right? To get them across that stage. So, because if they get that degree, they're going to be able to change the trajectory of their life. And it comes down to that mindset, right? If you can get many foster youth to start to see that, they can then graduate high school, be on a track to college or some type of trade program where they'll be able to sort of have a hope and belief in their life beyond what they had to endure during the foster care system.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so important. I think our last question for the night is for you, Tiana. And please, if anybody else need to add anything to it, please do so. But as a foster care youth, what is your greatest expense? And how do you utilize the financial aid and the program that we discussed to cover those costs?
I would say me. No, I'm joking. My largest cost is definitely like healthcare, mental health services, and like food, making sure that I'm able to not just eat, but eat well, not just like buy like the cheapest things that are in groceries. When it comes to FISE, I know from my personal experience, because I'm very in tune with the financial aid that I get, FISE is one of the largest grants that I get through the school. And so when I do get refunds from them, I like to budget it towards different things because I've learned over the years that a refund does not last. And so I just have to try and stretch it as much as I can. Um, but healthcare would definitely be like the largest cost because it's very hard to be insured as a foster youth. Like it's very difficult. Most of the times insurance or finding stuff. Did you guys hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Researching or finding resources to help with healthcare and mental health care is very, very hard, especially when you don't have insurance. And like most of the time, I don't know for anybody else, but I don't have like a consistent doctor because I don't have insurance. And so for most of my health issues, it just comes and I have to deal with it when it comes. And that adds up because it's medications, doctor's appointments, transportation to those appointments. But yeah.
Thank you.
And can I just
Does anybody has
speak on
anything?
that?
Mhm.
Yes, because if you are in foster care at 18 or older, or I believe it might be 16 or older, you should be eligible for Medicaid up to 27. And if you don't have that, I would highly recommend going back to your caseworker, and they should be able to help you get that, because you should have your health insurance up until 27.
You're muted,
Sorry, I
Tiana.
said I'm going to write that down, but I did have a meeting with Clarissa and she gave me like a couple of resources to apply to it. I'm lacking a lot of my document department, so I haven't been able to fill it out.
If you want to touch base, we can touch base.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think this discussion has been amazing, and I really want to thank you guys. But let's open it up for question. I don't see any question in the Q&A session. But please, if you guys have question, this is the time to ask them. We will do a follow-up email with the resources that were shared here. You know, if the panelists would like to share their contact information, I will definitely be sharing that as well. But I don't see any question. Did you guys see anything in the chat or the Q&A? Let's see it. I hope that the information, you know, was clear and we provided with.
Sorry to interrupt, but I did just see a
Ah.
question pop up from Miss Amanda, and she asked, "Are there liaisons for CUNY schools as well?"
So it's actually one person. Her name is Shirley DePena, and so she is the coordinator for CUNY, but she is kind of the hub for CUNY as a whole. And then for private, I know you didn't ask the private, but I'm just gonna cover the bases. For private, it is the SED team. It's Sarah, Sarah within SED, who's over the words, Clarissa, who is over the private campuses with the HEOP. So yeah, so not for your specific question, it's just one person, Shirley DePena, and I can include her information in the chat as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, she was not able to join us this time around, but you know, thank you so much, Jarrell, for enjoying the discussion. We definitely did as well. All right, I think I don't see anything else, but I just want to really thank all of you for joining us tonight. We will do a follow-up email with the resources and you know, a copy of the video of this discussion. I hope that you found the information helpful and really you know, inspiring so that you guys can start your research and connecting with amazing organizations and agencies that are here to help you. But before we wrap up, I would love to hear any final word from our panelists.
Well, I'm unmuted, so I guess I'll go. One, I just want to thank you, Maria, for organizing this and everybody else for coming and listening, giving me the opportunity to do this. Dr. Tony, I know you sent that initial email, so I have to shout you out. Thank you for this. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for, responding and putting yourself out there, because we definitely need someone who's closer to the students and has that lived experience. And you're currently living it on the college campus. Thank you, to Maria and your team for, including me on this. This is something I'm passionate about. I know Clarissa knows my story, knows my journey, and how much I just love just sharing. I'm not a gatekeeper by any means of any resources or any information that I find. I like to share and have it readily available. And same thing for Kelly. If we connect and it's something that you feel that I can help you with in your team, I'm through my organization and through my lived experience, I'll be happy to collaborate. First, I'll be emailing you, and I'll say in the next couple of weeks we got to get our meeting together, because I have some great ideas, and I want to definitely share my research, because everything we discussed tonight, it's in my research, and something specifically on what we can do here to increase sort of that and close the education gap for foster youth, and have that 97%, because as you know, 97% of students in foster care, they're getting to college, but 97% are not graduating. The 8 to 12 is the newest as of October of 2025, compared to the old stat of 3 to 9%. So we have a lot of work to do, but we can do it starting right here in New York.
I guess my last closing remark is, if you remember anything that we say, nothing at all, I would say ask, make those connections, reach out. And even if it's a closed door or this one person is not the right avenue, there is always another avenue. So never, be so uncomfortable that you're not able to make a new connection, because that connection can, as Tony mentioned before, literally change the trajectory of your life. So if you remember nothing else, connections are key. Networking is key.
And I just want to ditto everything that was just said. The most important thing is advocating for yourself. And like Clarissa just said, the worst thing is it's a closed door. So you go to the next one, and there will be somebody there to help you. You just have to keep trying. Sometimes it's daunting because, you're going through different avenues, different people, or different departments, but there is help there. And with these different fundings that we spoke to you tonight too, if you have any questions, you can always reach out and we would help guide you.
Thank you so much. I just want to wish everybody a good night. And again, thank you so much for being part of this discussion. And I hope to see you guys in some of the future events that we are going to be hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.